Okay, we are rested and rehydrated, and I charged my battery, and now we can continue on with part 2 of all the books I read in May. So I read, in summary, so to recap, I read 18 books, and then also in part 1 I talked about 2 additional books that I had forgotten to talk about in my April wrap-up. With all that, we're like more than halfway through, so let's go. Alright, so picking up where I left off, the next book I read was Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. I saw that used copies of this new edition were popping up all over Pango. I was interested in the hype, so yeah, I picked it up. And yeah, it's super sweet and sexy. So the premise of this is some human women get abducted from Earth for nefarious purposes by some evil aliens, and the beginning is kind of, they go through quite a bit of trauma. I will say, like, some people mentioned that, like, oh, I wasn't expecting to, like, see some of the women experience sexual assault. It's not described. Like, it does happen on page, but you don't necessarily, it doesn't describe the assault. It kind of describes the women reacting to it in the aftermath. So just depending on, like, what you are and are not comfortable reading, just putting that out there. And then they crash on this ice planet, and our main character, Georgie, is the one in the best physical condition to go out and try to find food or resources or figure out where the fuck they are. And she encounters this large blue alien race, and the main guy, what is his name? Vectal. He kind of like imprints on her as that she is the person who is meant to be his mate. And part of that is due to some specific circumstances about this planet that we learn about later. So at first there is like a language barrier. He's like, who is this? Who or what is this very, weak, delicate creature that like can't hunt and keeps getting into danger, but I love you and I want to protect you, and I will do anything for you. And she over time figures out how to convey to him that she's trying to help the rest of her compatriots that are stuck in the ship. And about I don't remember if it's like halfway through or whatever, something happens where they are now allowed to understand each other. The language barrier is an interesting aspect in terms of them like getting to know each other, and in terms of them learning to communicate, learning about each other, getting to know each other and kind of discovering their attraction for each other. But yeah, it is kind of useful that like halfway through we start to not have to deal with that anymore, so that things can kind of get explained. There is also a plot point of like surprise pregnancy, which I don't want to spoil too much, but I do feel like that may or may not be a trope that some people like. I do feel like they kind of really gloss over it. Like our heroine is kind of like, excuse me, what? I thought that was impossible. And then like in the next chapter she's like okay with it. Which I kind of wish we had like sat in that more, but that's also like not what this book is. This book is like, apart from like the beginning setup, it's not that deep. It's not that dark. It's not that complicated. It's more about like just like the relationship and bond that grows between these two characters. So, I think the kind of glossing over it suits the tone of the story, but I could have done with a little more examining of that, and I feel like that might be another point that other readers are like, she got over that way too quickly. But anyway, yeah, if you're here for super sweet couple dynamics and a very super protective, very gentle, very caring, generous, he's not really an alpha. He's just bigger than her and strong. But anyway, sexy fun times were promised. Sexy fun times were delivered. Will I continue with the series? I don't know. I feel like if my library carried ebook copies, definitely. But I don't know. We'll see. I feel like this is the kind of thing where, like, one day I might just be like, that's what I'm in the mood for, and then I might pick up the next book or so in the series. But mostly I kind of read it for the hype, and the hype knowledge curiosity is satisfied. Okay, so then I read and listened to the audiobook of Many Waters by Madeline L'Engle. This is book 4 in the Time Quintet. It starts with A Wrinkle in Time. I think this is the 4th book that's written, but chronologically it comes 3rd in that series. I think this is okay, but second to A Wrinkle in Time. It's my next favorite in the series. And of course, A Wrinkle in Time is my initial favorite in the series, but this is a very, very close second. And it's like such a different story that it's not really worth comparing the fantasy styles of the 2 books. So this story follows the twins Sandy and Dennis, and they accidentally get transported back in time to the time of Noah, right before he is given instructions to build the ark. And if you're unfamiliar with that Christian mythology, one of the very, very early stories is that God is displeased with the evil nature that is brewing in humanity, and he selects Noah and some people in his family to build a giant boat and get 2, a male and female of every animal to repopulate the earth, and then the entire earth is flooded, everything is wiped clean, and Noah's family repopulates the earth. So this happens in, a couple of the months, maybe like a year, many months leading up to Noah getting instructions and starting to build the ark. So I really love this because it really, really embraces the biblical mythology. They come to this time, and this is the time when there were giants, when angels walked among men, when, human beings lived to be several hundred years old. We see Manticore, we see Mammoth, and we see how Mammoth have changed in this time, and how the Mammoth are living in the desert. And yeah, it really embraces, like, the fantastical element of some of the early biblical stories that, people kind of people who haven't studied the Bible thoroughly kind of forget about that. There's all of, especially in the Old Testament, there's all of this really, really crazy stuff that you can't fucking take that as fact. That's chaos. So yeah, I think this book really embraces that. Of course, we're following along with that story. The twins get separated, and one of them is being taken care of by Noah's family, and the other one ends up with this other family of people who are clearly the not good people who are very selfish and violent, they're not clean. They eat rancid food. They're kind of very stereotypical, these are the people with positive traits that will build a healthy society, and then these are the people who are super selfish and kind of just in it for themselves, and of course God is displeased with them. And it's really a story of the growing up of the twins. They both kind of develop romantic feelings for a girl who her name is not recorded in the Bible as being somebody who survives the flood. So they, apart from both of them being kind of attracted to this young woman who they know they really shouldn't be attracted to her because they are not from her time. They need to get back to their own time, and it's not like they're going to be able to take her with them. But then also knowing that we don't have knowledge of her surviving this and dealing with that, the conundrum of we're not really supposed to change history, but how can we just let this awful thing happen? And there's also, of course, as in all of the books in this series, there's a lot of science, like metaphysical science in there. Like they're having a conversation with the angel, and one of the, let's see, who is this? Dennis is talking about like, well, yeah, my father is a physicist who specializes in space travel and the Tesseract. Yes, but space travel is supposed to deal with space, not time. But you can't separate space and time. I mean, space-time is a continuum, and there's lots of like astrophysics, metaphysics kind of stuff sprinkled in here. That kind of like what I talked about in part 1 about a swiftly tilting planet, where like, wow, like it's amazing that like these are books aimed at younger readers, aimed at kids, when they do have these complex themes. We do kind of deal with some like really heavy, heady metaphysical science stuff. I didn't finish my thought about the twins. That, them both kind of being enamored with the same girl is kind of like them no longer acting as a unit. Like there is some individual development. We start to see the individual personalities of the twins, which is, I think, something that we see like in a lot of stories of twins, and it's good to kind of see it repeated here, where they are kind of like treated as interchangeable as viewed by other people, and then here is a story where they are really, and that's been something that like they've kind of been okay with, but they're finally growing up. They're going to go off to college and study different things, and they're really starting to come into who they are as individuals, not as like a singular duplicate unit. So that's super interesting. Anyway, things end fine. I'll just give you that. Anyway, yeah, I had a great time with this one. And yeah, this is a great series. Great. Next, I've got Guilty Pleasures by Laurell K. Hamilton. I forgot to write down the name of the narrator, but that will all be in the description box. Title, author, narrator, translator, where applicable. And I'll have the list of all of the books I read, even though I'm going to split this up into a part 1 and part 2, just to pique your interest. Anyway, so yeah, Guilty Pleasures. This is the first book in the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series. I picked this up because I think I saw, it was Sam from Thoughts on Tomes has kind of started reading the series, and she's like, yeah, for like the time when it was written, these books kind of comparatively really hold up in terms of like the paranormal, the urban fantasy, paranormal romance genre. And I've definitely seen in reviews that like way later books in the series kind of go off the rails. But like at least like the first 10 books are like a solid paranormal urban fantasy series. So I picked it up, and yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed it via audio. And I kind of picked it up like in contrast. I started reading The Hollows, or I started listening to the Hollows series, and that was one where book 1 did not age well, and the audio was not really great to introduce me to the series. So if I continue with the Hollows, I'm definitely going to read at least the next book via ebook to see if my brain just kind of gets a sense of that world by reading it rather than listening to it. But this is one where like, yeah, I really was able to like pay attention and get a sense of the world and the characters via the audio very well. So what happens in this one? Because I took 0 notes because I read it really fast. So Anita Blake is kind of a vampire hunter. What is she? She's a summoner. She's somebody who can raise the dead, raise zombies, and you can like use them to gather evidence, to like provide testimony in court. Is kind of like the official purpose. And she lives in a world where like vampires and zombies and such are kind of like common knowledge, and there's like this debate of like, are vampires people? Like what does it mean that like death doesn't necessarily mean death anymore? We have and there's like people who want to be like accepting and inclusive of vampires and being like, hey, if we like get along with them and like make hard rules, we can all get along. And then there's other people who are like, you know, race pure race idealist, you know, kind of like white supremacists, but they're like, you know, they're not, you know, it doesn't count as murder if you kill them because they're already dead, like they're monsters, like they shouldn't be allowed to exist. You know, there's the whole spectrum of human ideas towards things that are new and scary. So what's the actual plot? Hold on, give me a second. So she works for kind of like a private investigator, bounty hunter kind of agency, and she's initially approached to investigate some high-profile vampire murders, and then she turns it down, but then like the vampires get a hold of her and kind of force her hand, be like, we need you to figure out what the fuck's going on. You know, and so she's looking into it and things are suspicious. So that's kind of like the plot, is her figuring out like who was able to kill like 3 of the 5 most high profile old vampires in the city. And she's hired by the oldest vampire, who is in the body of a child, which I think is like appropriately creepy, that like the most powerful being, the oldest most powerful being, is a child. Like I find evil children like a thing that creeps me out in a fun way. Like not in real life, but just like, I don't know, seeing like unsettling children like in movies or something, I'm just like, ugh, I got chills. Like a thing that's not supposed to be evil being like the most evil. Like I find it's just like a character trope that I find really interesting. She's kind of, we see like some potential romantic development with her and a vampire, who then kind of gets like put out of the picture for most of the story, but I could see there's probably going to be some character development between the two of them going forward. And then she also kind of teams up with a human who works at a vampire strip club, and there's a lot of conversation about kind of comparing these humans who allow vampires to feed off them, like they're kind of towing the line between like drug addicts and sex workers. And there's some language in there that's kind of like derogatory towards drug users and sex workers in a way that they don't go into it too hard. I think it's definitely like appropriate for the time in which this was written, but that's definitely like ideas that I wouldn't be okay with that kind of language being in something that was freshly written, but I can definitely see like for the time that this book was written that comparison is apt given where that conversation was, and that is something that I'm kind of interested in moving forward in the series, because like while there is like initially her and this human, like there's definitely like romantic tension with her and this stripper performer human, where like she doesn't really respect like what he does, but like she kind of comes to understand more of it. That's the thing. It's like there's some, you know, language that's like clearly, I guess like, yes, this is the world, both in the book and like the time in which it was written, but there is like a conversation in there that kind of like challenges the like, who are you to judge, and like you don't know the whole story, and like people do this for a variety of reasons, and you can never really know what the whole backstory is. Yeah, so I liked it, and I definitely plan to continue on with the series at some point. So before that, I had listened to Proven Guilty, which is book number 8 in the Dresden Files series, narrated by James Marsters, and he's awesome at narrating those books. So in this one definitely gets it gets dark, especially compared to the last one that like was super just like wacky and entertaining. This one definitely gets dark. I think like in a character development way that is appropriate. We open with Harry in his new role as a member of the Wardens of the White Council having to witness the execution of a fairly young dark wizard. And, you know, the book is kind of wrestling, not focused, but we do come back to this conversation of a lot of these dark wizards, particularly the young ones, they go that way because there's like not enough good wizards around to take them under their wing and guide them when they come into their powers. And when they kind of come into their powers without guidance, they can just kind of start going down a wrong path. Because and we see that with a particular character that we follow, that the intentions were good, but the effects were actually quite damaging. And when you perform magic that is damaging to other people, it starts to kind of like stain your soul, and then it kind of, you know, without intervention, it leads to like where this opening scene is, where this person is beyond saving. And that's something that Harry is really wrestles with, because his background is, he is somebody who got involved with some dark magic at a young age, and he's like the only one that he knows of who was saved from that path. And then he's really bitter about it and he's just really tired of having to prove that he's one of the good guys. And I think that's really starting to wear at him, especially as he's having to witness this kind of stuff at this point. And part of like why there's not enough wizards around is because of the war with the vampires that Harry kind of instigated in earlier books. It's more complicated than that, of course. So that's kind of like where his headspace is at. And then he's also, you know, got the fallen angel that has a hold of him, that keeps trying to tempt him with more power. And while this fallen angel doesn't seem to be as evil and destructive as some of the other ones he's met, it's getting really hard. He knows that, like, that's one of those things that's just going to look bad and is going to set him up for being executed if the wrong people find out that this fallen angel has this influence over him. But he's just getting to a point where it's getting real hard to keep saying no. Again, like that tension of your good intentions versus what the actual lasting effects and ramifications are of some of these decisions. And it's just it does really wrestle with the tension of, like, I had no good choices. Just how uncomfortable it is to know that you're being punished or facing punishment for having no good choices, and just like how much that sucks. So that's kind of like where Harry's headspace is, and like what the overall plot is Harry runs into the daughter of his friend Michael, who is one of the like holy bearers of the holy swords. He's like a man who fights with the power of God. He's a holy knight, and he finds Michael's eldest daughter, and she's clearly super rebellious. You know, she's all goth, piercings, tattoos, and clearly, you know, the bane of her mother's existence, rebellious teenager. And she comes to Harry because she's participating in this horror movie convention, and some weird shit is going down. And initially it's like her sort of boyfriend is framed for murder, and he's kind of framed for murder because the actual murder, not murder, for assault. Is it assault? Maybe it's murder. Ooh. But like the actual cause is something paranormal, so like of course the police don't fucking know what they're looking at, and they just arrest this kid. So that's how Harry gets involved. But then more and more mysterious attacks start happening that replicate events and bad guys from these horror movies. So like, what the fuck's going on with that? So we're figuring out what that plot line is. We're figuring, you know, we're following the family drama of her name is Molly and her mother's name is Chastity, I believe. You know, we're following Molly's story, particularly her relationship with her mother. We get some really great development between Harry and Chastity. We basically get a whole development as to why Chastity has always kind of really disliked and mistrusted Harry, and how that's kind of been misguided. It's kind of been covering up something else that's going on. And like the ending is super cool, how like all these pieces fall into place and like things turn out all right. I don't love that we're back to like broody, unhappy, dark Harry. He's not my favorite version of himself. But I do think like this is a story. This particular plot line kind of gives him like a reason to pull himself together for the sake of other people, and that's really like consistent with the character development that is really strong with Harry Dresden. Is he always kind of wants to go back into like going it alone so that he doesn't endanger other people, and then like he keeps having to like relearn that lesson of like, no, like, you know, you owe your friends to be honest with them, you owe your compatriots to let them have your back as much as you have their back, and then also like you as a person of power, what do you owe to the up and coming people in your community? So yep, I still enjoy it, clearly. And then next I read / listened to the final book in the Time Quintet, An Acceptable Time by Madeline Engle. So this follows Meg's daughter when she's 18? No, like 16? No. She's in college. So I think chronologically there's actually some other books in like the Polly O'Keefe series that take place between, or I guess like between Planet and Many Waters, but we're back at the parents' now the grandparents' house. You know, we return to events that circle around the Star Watching Rock, and this involves druids and early people that we actually saw like in a time flashback in A Swiftly Tilting Planet. We return to the people of the wind, who are a combination of like druids from the British Isles who in this book have now settled and intermingled with some of the indigenous population. So this story, so we follow Polly, and she encounters a young girl and a young boy. Are they brother and sister? Fuck, I don't, you know. Memory like a goldfish, you know? So she's seeing echoes of these people from the time way in the past. You know, there's kind of like a hole in time that Polly's kind of falling in and out of. And then also a doctor. The doctor's brother. So we saw the doctor in book 2, which is called A Wind in the Door. Dr. Colubra, which is Latin for snake. And we do see a resurgence of Louise the Larger, the snake in the garden. So her brother is a bishop, and he's also kind of been pulled into this like weird time loop. And in this kind of past world, there are some people who are experiencing a drought, and they believe that they need a blood sacrifice, and because Polly comes through right place, wrong time, or wrong time, right place, whatever, however you want to phrase it, they believe that she would be the appropriate sacrifice to appease the gods and bring rain. So, and she's, you know, with one group of people who are trying to protect her and be like, you know, this sacrifice can be something like symbolic. It doesn't have to be literal blood sacrifice. It doesn't have to be literal violence. You know, and we're kind of wrestling with that dilemma of like, but violence just begets more violence. So how do you break that cycle when just laying there and taking it means that like your people are going to be conquered? So like how do you wrestle with that? There's some interesting things about the nature of time in here. We human creatures make watches and clocks and sensitive timing devices, but we don't understand what we're timing. When something has happened, it doesn't vanish, the bishop said. It makes waves, as sound does, or a pebble dropped in a pond. So, like, if you think about, like, a thing happens, and then, like, you see the effects that are traced back to the single event, but the single event is over, but has effects. Like, that's an interesting way to think about time. Yeah, and as, like, with the other books in the series, we get some like, deep themes, some really good, like, coming-of-age themes. You know, there's little bits of wisdom. Let's see. Polly is talking to Bishop, and she's like, are you sure we're going to get home? Are you sure things are going to be right? My dear, I'm seldom sure of anything. Life at best is a precarious business, and we aren't told that difficult or painful things won't happen, just that it matters. It matters not just to us, but to the entire universe. Yeah, so it's, I think, not my favorite in the series. Maybe I would have appreciated it more if I had read the Polly O'Keefe side series. I feel like I need to get my hands on some copies of those. But yeah, I think still a solid installment, still a great example of Madeline L'Engle's writing and very creative world building and mixture of coming of age and high scientific ideas and some playing with like historical themes and stuff. So yeah, anyway, glad I finally finished out that series. 4 more. Okay, these next 2 maybe will be quick, maybe I will go on about them because I really enjoy this series. So next I read Swedish Scoundrel by Elizabeth Hoyt, which is number 9 in the series of the Maiden Lane series, which was a mistake. I accidentally skipped number 8, but fear not, I then checked out number 8 and read that next. So I should talk about them in order then. Okay, so number 8 is Dearest Rogue, and this deals with Phoebe, is that her name? Lady Phoebe Batten. So she is the younger sister of a very powerful duke, but she is the character who has slowly over the course of the series been going blind. So because of her disability, she never had a coming out season. She's losing a lot of her independence. So we've kind of seen how she's kind of like lost her independence, but also like how she's kind of maintained her love of life and her love for what she is still able to do and still able to appreciate. So I'm really glad that she's getting her own story. And in this story, it's a bodyguard romance between her and Captain Trevelyan, who we have seen in previous books, who has been injured, so he's no longer able to work with the Dragoons, but he's been hired as her personal bodyguard because her brother is super protective of her. For some good reason, because the book opens with an attempted kidnapping of her, and there's several attempts and then a success of the kidnapping of her over the course of the book. And the kidnapping is mostly to take advantage of her wealth and the wealth of her brother and to put some pressure on them. And it's kind of orchestrated by the Lords of Chaos. I'm glad we've returned to that plot point. I think the books in the series that deal with the Lords of Chaos which are the most interesting ones in the series. They're kind of like this group of very powerful, very, very nasty men, which we definitely see in the next book, who their members tend to be like men who are very high up in society. So even once you discover that they're behind some really, really atrocious criminal activity, it's really hard to prosecute them in this society. Anyway, relationship between Phoebe and Trevelyan is awesome, and I think overall is pretty solid disability representation. And like her with her blindness, like she is really adamant about like she is still deserving of independence. She wants to live. She doesn't want to be in prison. Like if she's just going to be like locked up in her home all the time, like that's not living. That's not fucking worth it. Like she's blind, not dead. And there's a great conversation where she's like traveling with Trevelyan and trying beer, and she's like, I don't really know if I like it yet, but I'm gonna keep drinking it. And he's like, why are you drinking something you don't like? And she's like, I want to try new things. And the thing is, like, I need to find, it's gonna be too hard to look up without a laptop. But it's like, life is about finding new things, finding new experiences, and some experiences, some things are an acquired taste, and like to only try a thing once and declare that you don't like it is kind of cowardly. Like you should be able to like give things multiple chances, find joy where you can. And she doesn't want to be seen as like this delicate object to be protected. and she actually gets like a marriage proposal, and like the reason she rejects it is like, you would essentially wrap me in bubble wrap, and like, I don't want that, I don't need that. And then also with Trevelyan, because he has this injury, he walks with a cane, and he's struggling with it. He's struggling with the loss of his ability. He's really doubting and because of like his compromised physical ability, he's really doubting his ability to be a good bodyguard. But when like shit hits the fan, he's the one who keeps her safe, and partially is because of like the feelings that they are developing with each other. And that's a fun relationship too, because she teases him relentlessly because he's trying to be like super stoic and not a lot of emotion, be super professional. So she gets the vibe that like he doesn't like her and he tolerates her and thinks she's silly, but like the way that she like pokes and needles him and like really enjoys getting a reaction out of him, and he like enjoys it too. He enjoys that like she brings reaction out of him, she brings emotion out of him, she is not afraid to like be silly and like what she likes and want what she wants, and that really kind of breaks him out of, it allows him to live his life too. So that's great. Now I don't know like what research or context the author has in writing these characters with these disabilities. I mean, overall, the conversations with Phoebe talking about blindness, I do think like they hit a lot of the good notes that I see in reading like disability justice conversations. Like there's things in this book that are like straight out of like Disability Visibility, the book, and also Disfigured, the book that's kind of about disability representations in fairy tales and fiction. So there's a lot in there that is, I think, hitting the right notes in terms of like how we view a disability as not necessarily making somebody's existence be a burden either to themselves or to other people. I should go looking for, reviews from Own Voices reviewers who are blind or low vision, or people who also have experienced an injury that has led to chronic pain and limited mobility going forward. I'd love to see their takes on it, because like I'm not an expert in those things, but I do think I have read enough to be like, if this is not coming from own experience of the author, she's done some good research. I feel confident in saying that the depiction is quite promising. Anyway, so that is Dearest Rogue, and then Sweetest Scoundrel follows the sister of a person who I don't want to say because it's a spoiler for Dearest Rogue. But she is now in charge of the accounts that finance the rebuilding of Heart's Folly, which is like this pleasure garden that got burned down in an earlier book, and Asa Makepeace is the one who is rebuilding it, and she's the one who now has the purse strings. And because he refuses to like respond to her letters, he keeps terrible accounts. His account is like a box of receipts in illegible handwriting. She decides to come in there and cut him off because he's financially irresponsible. And then conversations happen, and basically she's like, fine, I'm going to come in and do your accounts. And I'm going to oversee. Okay, fine, you want this to be built? Fine, I'm going to help you manage it. And, she does things like he comes in, they go chandelier shopping, and he's like, I want this one. And she's like, really? You want the most expensive thing in here? Like, why? Why do you want the most expensive thing in here? And he's like, well, because it's the biggest, and it's going to give the most light, and because of the crystals, it's going to do this. And she's like, okay, so there's a practical reason, because it's big. Does it need to be gold-plated? Can it just be brass? Because that would be significantly cheaper. And he's like, sure, okay, great. It wouldn't have occurred to him to take only what he needed and leave what he didn't need. He would have just taken the thing as it is. But she has the detailed mind to figure out what is it that we want and what is it can we adjust. So, love seeing, a money smart woman, a numbers smart woman, kind of come in and work with somebody who has a great vision but needs some of that business sense to actually get it to flow smoothly. So they're kind of like button heads because, he feels like she's no fun. And she's frustrated that he's a philandering creative type, and the story that kind of evolves is somebody is trying to sabotage the rebuilding and reopening of the theater. There's like some roofing tiles crash down and almost kill someone. There's some damage to the stage, so they're trying to figure out what's going on with this. And then with our heroine, like, we learn that she has a very traumatic history. She has grown up to be very afraid of being alone with men. She has this bodyguard who is a former black slave from the Caribbean. And I think they do a good job of not desexing the only black character in the story. They go into his history. He gets some pretty good character development. We see like his relationship with his wife, and we see like how her brother hired him to protect her and make her feel safe, and how they have developed this relationship where, this bodyguard, she has gotten to know him well enough that she trusts him. Like, a lot of her fear and trust is with men that she doesn't know. Because of childhood trauma, and the childhood trauma has also left her terrified of dogs. Of course, over the course of the story, she finds a mangy dog who's like starving to death and brings him back to life, and that kind of parallels her opening up to Asa Makepeace. And she always thought because of her past trauma she would never be able to have a romantic relationship. She would never be able to have a family or children because she could like never engage with men in a healthy way. But like, their interactions with each other, he gains her trust, and of course romance ensues. But as they uncover who is trying to sabotage the theater, they also uncover like what happened with her past trauma, and it has to do with the Lords of Chaos and some pretty horrific child abuse. And we understand her loyalty to a certain person because they saved her from this, and we're like, how could you like be loyal to this really person who seems to be really horrific? I do love that we also, in actually both of these books, we see the resurgence of Alf, who is a street urchin that we encountered in an earlier book, who is a young girl dressed as a boy. And in one of the books, it's in number 8, Dearest Rogue, Trevelyan acknowledges that like, oh, I know that she's a girl, but she seems much more comfortable dressing as a boy and going through the world like that, so I will not reveal her secret. I will, to people who don't know who she is, I will refer to Alf as he, and there's no need to complicate the matter. And then through most of book 9, Swedish Scoundrel, none of those characters know that Alf is actually a girl, so everyone refers to Alf with he, him pronouns. And we see that Alf is like I know that Alf gets their own book later in the series. I don't know if we get some like trans or non-binary representation with Alf. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I'm just like, I kind of want to go in blind to it, but we definitely see the development of Alf as a very skilled. They're very sneaky. They're good at eavesdropping. They're good at like breaking into places. They're like a nice little secret agent, message runner. So I look forward to seeing more of their story. But I had a thought about what is it that I really like about this romance series is I love that the romance between our main characters is always them learning the different complexities of the other person. There's always, it's kind of like a formula of, they think this person is uptight and no fun. They think this person is like super professional and annoyed at them. They think this person is super irresponsible. And as they get to know each other, they get to know the multiple. They're like, you know, you are powerful and wild. You are, you know, reserved and kinky as fuck. Like, you know, whatever, like multifaceted. Like, I love that the attraction is not necessarily okay, except for like book 2, which I didn't love. But for the most part, the relationships are not insta-love. There are people who are kind of like at odds with each other. Sometimes they hate each other and sometimes they just like don't. They just seem like incompatible personalities, but as they get to know each other, like they find that they actually are quite compatible, and I love that development. I'm really enjoying this series. Anyway, if you haven't heard me talk about the series before, this is a series that has Regency Batman. Basically, we have a masked vigilante called the Ghost of St. Giles that we're introduced to briefly in earlier books, but it really starts with book 4. And book 4 is where I started it, and I think is still my favorite. The first 3 books are still my least favorite in the series. I think the author was really kind of getting the world under her feet. But by book 4, oh boy, it's great. Actually, I think the only other one I don't really like is book 7. And it's more like it just wasn't, because we weren't dealing with a plot point that dealt with the Lords of Chaos, it just wasn't as interesting. Okay, where are we? It's warm in here. 2 more. Okay, so the next book I finished was A Clash of Steel, a Treasure Island remix by C.B. Lee. So this is a YA historical fiction romance that follows the story, that draws inspiration from the true Chinese pirate, what's her name? Zheng Yisou, and remixes it and kind of follows some of the story beats of Treasure Island. It's not like a complete, like, just like gender flipped story of Treasure Island. It really is its own story, but we do have some plot, you know, we do have a non-pirate young character who has a key to this legendary pirate treasure, who falls in with people who may or may not still be pirates. They have a pirate history, but whether they are now, who knows? And then deals with like threats of mutiny and deals with like figuring out where that treasure is. There's also like the burning of an important building in the beginning of the story. So it definitely draws inspiration from the story of Treasure Island, but it's not a one-to-one recreation of every plot point and every character. So in this one, this is a sapphic story. We follow Zhang as she comes to the city hoping that her mother is going to train her in the ways of business to run her mother's famous tea house, but it turns out her mother just wants to keep her safe and like package her off to a marriage, and she's just like, no, I don't want safety, I want your life, I want choice. Like that's the whole thing. It's like you work so hard to give me a life that's different from yours, but then like you would dare remove choice from my future. So that's Zhang's, starting story. And she runs into another young woman named An. And then Zhang is, am I pronouncing that right? I love that there's a pronunciation guide in the back. Thank you so much. Shang. Not Zhang. Shang. So then she, on the streets of the main city that she goes to, she runs into another young woman from a fisherman's boat named An, who is of Vietnamese heritage, and sparks fly between them, and events happen, and An discovers that Shang has a piece of the famous treasure map of this legendary pirate queen who kind of disappeared and nobody ever found out what happened to her treasure. So in order to escape this arranged marriage and her mother's wrath and frustration and whatever, Shang teams up with Anne's ship to go searching for this treasure. And it was lovely. I think it was kind of like a slow build, but we got like a lot of, it's just some good solid world building. You know, we're really set the stage of, you know, this takes place in 1826, and we really like set the stage of like the South China Sea and all the different cultures that we're meeting around there. Like we get, you know, we even on the ship that they're on, we have just a variety of cultures, a variety of languages being spoken there. So it's great to see a historical fiction that what reflected, you know, how trade and shipping really caused a lot of cultures to intermingle. And we definitely see, like, you know, the queer love story that happens between Shang and An. There's another queer couple on that pirate ship. That's nice to see that, like, they're not the only queer characters in this world. And we really see Shang come into her own. We see her gain a lot of confidence. We see her, you know, kind of step out of the dream of seeking her mother's approval and really kind of learning, like, what does she want for herself rather than just trying to always pursue her mother's approval. And yeah, this was lovely. And also, like, this cover is beautiful. And this book came with some super cute fan art. Maybe it's some super cute fan art. And we've got really lovely map in the end pages. So yeah, if this is on your radar, this is delightful. So hurrah. Okay, and then the last book that I'm going to talk about, I haven't quite finished yet. I've got like an hour left on the audiobook, but you know what? It's a nonfiction. It's not going to have some surprise twist at the ending that's going to change my opinion of it, so I might as well talk about this junker. This is The Warmth of Other Suns, The Epic Story of America's Great Migration by Isabel Wilkerson. And I'm listening to the audiobook, which is narrated by Robin Miles, who of course is excellent. So this talks about, starting in around like 1915, Black Southerners started leaving the South. And they started moving. We follow three families. One of them settles in New York City, one of them settles in Chicago, and one of them settles in Los Angeles. And we see the various driving forces. People are, you know, leaving the Jim Crow South. They're, you know, with World War I and World War II, they're leaving for industrial jobs in the North. They're trying to escape Jim Crow South. They're looking for new opportunities. They're just looking, you know, to escape the endless shackles of sharecropping. And it's really chronicling, like, how this is, let's see, like, a central argument of this book has been that the Great Migration was an unrecognized immigration within the country. So she kind of talks about, like, the definitions of how these people are immigrants, how, yes, they are escaping hard times, they are going towards opportunity, but the ways in which, like, you know, compared to other notable migrations in the past, just like how massive this was over these decades, how the people traveled farther, and just like the different like social dynamics and like gender dynamics of this movement, like how interesting that was and how it really changed the face of our nation. It changed like how the country saw, you know, its Black citizens, how people responded to, you know, Black people moving into their neighborhoods. It talks a lot about redlining. It talks a lot about, you know, what happens when, like, a Black family would move into a neighborhood and, like, the white flight of people leaving those neighborhoods. But also, like, how the migrants often did encounter success. Like, you know, someone who trained as a doctor was actually able to make a living and practice as a doctor in a way that he never would have been able to in the Jim Crow South. And just, yeah, anyway, I really like Isabel Wilkerson's investigative journalism writing, because I like that she chose to follow a couple of focal families, because she really adds this linking narrative that kind of helps me particularly follow these historical events. Like, it's kind of harder for me to like keep track of like what was changing, you know, various laws and reactions, and like putting other historical events in context. But it's really helpful to like anchor them to the story of, you know, a particular family and like their particular storyline. Yeah, it's fascinating. It is a notable chunk in the history of our country, and it's in particular the history of Black people in our country. And yeah, it's great. Ta-da! We made it! Okay. If you've made it to the end of this video, can you leave me an emoji with, I don't know, if there's like a sword emoji or some kind of pirate emoji? That'd be great. Anyway, I hope you have a good rest of your day. I encourage you to go out into the world and be curious. And I will catch you folks in my next video.